Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're cracking open a pretty fascinating case file to investigate a high-stakes mystery that is affecting communities all across the country. Why are our best, most experienced teachers packing up and fleeing the classroom? To figure this out, we're diving deep into a recent doctoral dissertation by Dr. Keisha Ferguson-Thomas. Our goal today is to take this rigorous, scholarly document and translate it into something we can all easily understand and appreciate. We're going to explore the core problems that sparked her research, the purpose of the study, some genuinely surprising findings in the data, and most importantly, what this all means for the real world. We are going to find out what's really driving the teacher dropout crisis.
We've got a lot to cover, so here's the agenda. First, we'll look at the teacher dropout crisis on a macro level. Then, we'll investigate the root cause by zooming in on a specific region. Third, we'll break down the 3 dimensions of burnout. Fourth, we'll reveal what the data actually says. And finally, we'll talk about how to keep our teachers.
All right, part 1, the teacher dropout crisis, a multi-billion-dollar emergency.
$7 billion. That is the estimated annual cost of teacher attrition in the United States. $7 billion. And honestly, that massive number might even be a conservative estimate because it doesn't even account for federal funding losses or the hidden costs of teachers just constantly transferring between districts. You know, when a school loses a teacher, it costs roughly $20,000 just to recruit, hire, and train a replacement. And the kicker is, those replacements often have way less experience or lack full certification. This is a massive financial drain that fundamentally hurts student achievement, especially in low-income and Title I schools where this turnover is usually the highest.
Educational researcher Thomas Carroll really hit the nail on the head here. He noted that America's schools are struggling with a growing teacher dropout problem. And, as he put it, we are digging a deep hole for ourselves. It's literally a leaky bucket problem. We are caught in this crazy cycle of pouring brand new teachers into our nation's classrooms only to lose them at a faster and faster rate. We can't just recruit our way out of this crisis. We have to figure out how to plug the holes and retain the highly qualified professionals we already have.
So, to be totally clear, when we say teacher attrition, what are we actually talking about? We don't mean a teacher who's just packing up their desk to take a job at a different school down the street. We mean the phenomenon of teachers leaving the profession entirely. The data shows that while about 8% of teachers might transfer schools in a given year, another 8% are abandoning teaching altogether. So the big question that drove Dr. Ferguson-Thomas's research was simply, why?
Which brings us to part 2. Investigating the root cause, and what we're calling the Region 2 mystery.
To solve this massive national problem, the researchers zoomed in on a specific local area, Region 2 of Virginia. This is a huge workforce covering places like Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Norfolk, and Newport News. Now get this, at the start of the 2024 to 2025 school year, the state of Virginia had an average teacher vacancy rate of roughly 3%. But in Region 2, 67% of its localities were suffering from vacancy rates significantly higher than the state average. It was the region with the highest rate of unfilled teaching positions in all of Virginia. They were experiencing this unprecedented exodus, and local officials just couldn't fully explain why.
Look, we all know teaching is a stressful job. The long hours, the mountains of administrative paperwork, the immense emotional labor. It's a lot. But the core purpose of this study was to move beyond the anecdotes and actually look at the hard data. The big question was, does teacher burnout actually predict if these specific teachers are going to leave the profession? To answer this, we have to isolate the psychological variables at play.
So let's move to part 3. 3 dimensions of burnout, identifying the suspects. Burnout isn't just needing a really long nap. It's a diagnosed psychological syndrome. To measure it properly, the researcher used a gold standard diagnostic tool called the Maslach Burnout Inventory, which breaks burnout down into 3 distinct measurable steps. Step 1 is emotional exhaustion. This is when a teacher's emotional resources are just completely depleted. They're running on fumes. Step 2 is depersonalization. This is almost a defense mechanism to that exhaustion, where the teacher mentally detaches and develops cynical or callous attitudes toward their students and peers. And finally, step 3 is reduced personal accomplishment, which is basically a total decline in feeling competent. The teacher feels like nothing they do works or matters anymore. The study wanted to find out which of these 3 specific steps actually pulls the trigger and makes a teacher quit.
Let's get right into the findings. Part 4, what the data revealed. Unmasking the culprit.
The researcher surveyed 100 experienced K-12 core subject teachers across Region 2. And here is the grand reveal. The statistical analysis proved that emotional exhaustion is the definitive culprit. It's the primary driver pushing teachers out. The higher the exhaustion, the more likely they are to quit. But here's the crazy part. Depersonalization, that cynical detachment we always associate with burned-out workers, it didn't significantly predict if they would quit. Cynics stay. Cynicism isn't the breaking point. On the flip side, a sense of personal accomplishment actually acts as a shield. When a teacher feels successful and competent, it anchors them to the classroom and keeps them from leaving.
So basically, an emotionally exhausted teacher is a teacher with one foot out the door. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that exhaustion, not cynicism and not a lack of caring, is the primary engine behind this whole dropout crisis. Teachers aren't leaving because they suddenly dislike kids. They're leaving because they are emotionally bankrupt. The demands of the job have completely depleted their reserves.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, How to Keep Our Teachers, and Applying the Solutions.
Now that the data has solved the mystery of why they leave, how do we use this to actually convince our educators to stay? Well, the study frames the solution using a highly regarded concept called self-determination theory, or SDT. This theory basically reminds us that teachers are human beings, not just cogs in an educational machine. And humans need three things to thrive. We need to feel competent, we need autonomy, meaning a voice and control over our work, and we need to feel connected to the people around us. When those needs are met, we thrive. When they're blocked, we burn out.
So it all boils down to a pretty stark choice for school leaders today. You can either foster a supportive environment that protects a teacher's psychological needs, trusting their expertise, minimizing useless administrative burdens, which directly results in retention, versus the alternative, creating an unsupportive environment full of high-time pressure, crushing workloads, and top-down micromanagement. That kind of environment acts as a pressure cooker that guarantees emotional exhaustion and ultimately drives them right out of the profession.
Based on the study's findings, administrators can actually use a specific playbook to act as a shield. First, screen teachers for well-being and exhaustion early in the fall. Intervene before the exhaustion becomes terminal. Second, drastically reduce non-teaching administrative workloads so teachers actually have time to teach. Third, give teachers autonomy. Let them use their professional judgment. And fourth, build strong communities where principals and colleagues offer genuine social support and trust.
I'm going to leave you with this final thought to consider. This research proves that we are losing our teachers not to a lack of passion, but to a profound exhaustion of their emotional resources. Fixing our broken education system isn't just about spending billions to recruit and hire new people. It is about fundamentally caring for the well-being of the highly qualified professionals we already have. We know the cause now. The real question is, do we have the will to change the environment? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.